the mission of Voices of Hope really weaves in so perfectly with our mission at Speak Up in helping people tell their true stories and helping people connect. And it's just been such an honor to be involved in this process. Voices of Hope is an organization I feel really passionately about, and I feel really lucky and honored, and I know Matt does too, to play even a small part of it. Sharon and Jeff and Lois, Peter, Evelyn, Matt, and I met for only over 3 weeks. When we started, we were really, this was new to all of us. Matt and I had never done anything like this before, and everybody was just so gracious and willing to work, and what they came up with in this short amount of time is terrific, and I'm excited to present it to you today. And now I'm going to introduce our last storyteller, Lois Berkowitz. Lois grew up in the suburbs of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and went on to become a clinical psychologist. She met her husband, Alan, while working at the Institute of Living in Hartford. And they have a son and a daughter who she says both make her very proud. Now, I did not get a chance to practice this phrase with Lois, and I'm kicking myself about it, so I'm going to do the best I can. And here it is. This is what she said. It's her favorite Yiddish phrase. Nicht in front von de Kinder. Is that German?
It's Yiddish.
It's Yiddish. Did I say it right? Nicht in front von de Kinder, which means not in front of the kids. And this is her great explanation. She said, whenever I heard that phrase, I knew that my parents and grandparents were going to talk about something that I really wanted to hear, but that they obviously did not want me to hear, or that they were going to be talking about me. I love that. Please welcome Lois Berkowitz. It's gonna help. Yeah, that looks good. Thanks.
The phone rings, and it's bad news. It's December 2006, and I'm at a holiday party with friends. It's a few weeks out till my son's bar mitzvah, and I just find out that my 81-year-old father, who lives alone, has fallen and injured his back. That was pretty much the story of my life the last few years of my dad's life. In and out of emergency rooms, for this, for that. I was practically on a first-name basis with the ER staff. So my husband and I head over to Dad's place. When we get there, we decide to call 911. Dad is in a tremendous amount of pain. He's a man who can tolerate a tremendous amount of pain. You see, he spent a good part of his adolescence in Auschwitz, where beatings were a regular occurrence. And then there was that one time when a guard just yanked one of his teeth out of his mouth, just because. So while we're waiting for the ambulance, I'm thinking, you know what? Why don't we pull some ice out of the freezer and see if it'll help with the swelling in his back? I open up the freezer, and every inch is packed with everything except ice. So it's like a wall of food. Mostly frozen meals, but lots of orange juice. And not the cans, of frozen orange juice, but carton after carton of Tropicana that he bought in bulk when it was on sale, 2 for $5. I guess you never know when you might need mimosas for 50 people. So, we begin the search for something that will serve as an ice pack while my dad is moaning in pain. I'm pulling things out one by one. Potato kugel, kreplach, lean cuisine. And as much pain as my father was in, he was laser focused on what I was doing. You see, my father and I have a history when it comes to food that involves him not trusting that I won't throw something out if it's spoiled or past the sell-by date. And the reason he doesn't trust me is I do throw stuff out if it's spoiled or past the sell-by date. My dad, on the other hand, believes that all food was precious and it should always be valued and never thrown out. I can still picture him in the kitchen of my home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm in the kitchen. I take an apple out of the fridge, looks spoiled to me, and he catches me as I'm about to toss it. He takes it and he says, "It's fine," and he takes a bite. I was gross. Okay, I get it. For 4 years, when my father was in the ghetto and in the concentration camp, he barely had enough food to survive. A meal consisted of one meal a day, which was stale bread made of sawdust and soup made of dirty water and potato peels. My dad weighed 75 pounds at the age of 20 when he was liberated in 1945 from the death camp. So he was always going to have enough food on hand. So I'm still pulling stuff out of the freezer, and I'm holding things up so that I can get a thumbs up or a thumbs down from Dad to see what he was willing to sacrifice for the sake of his injured back. I hold the box up, and I hear, "Not the Swedish meatballs." I guess that was a favorite. So we eventually settled on some frozen potato latkes. It was almost Hanukkah after all. So Dad ended up needing surgery to repair a vertebrae in his back. And while he was recovering, he came over to our house for Shabbat dinner, and my son asked him to listen to some of his Torah portion to give feedback and just generally review. You see, my dad came from a very, very religious family, and before the Nazis came and ruined his life, he went to a Jewish school called a yeshiva. So he knew Torah and he knew prayers like the back of his hand. All of that changed in April of 1943, when my father, his parents, his neighbors, relatives and friends, all of whom were Jewish, were herded into cattle cars. The Nazis said they were going to a labor camp, but my dad's mom suspected something worse. So as the men and women were being herded into separate cattle cars, his mother took him by the hand. She told him that she loved him. She told him that he should do what he could to live and make a good life for himself. My uncle was able to escape into the woods, but he was never heard from again. And my dad had the choice to join his brother in the woods, but he chose to stay with his parents because he thought they might need him. But he was already separated from his mother, and things weren't going to get any better from there. During the 3-day ride in the train, they were smushed together like sardines with no food and no water. When they arrived at Auschwitz, my father's parents were sent in a different direction. My father was stripped naked, his head was shaved, they tattooed some numbers on his arm, they showered him with some kind of anti-lice powder, and they gave him a striped uniform to wear. As soon as he had an opportunity, he asked an inmate when he might see his parents. And the inmate pointed to the smoke billowing from the crematorium and said, "That's where your parents are." His parents were murdered along with his grandparents, his uncles, his aunts, and his cousins. From that moment on, at the age of 17, my father was completely alone in the world. Not only that, he would have to navigate the next 2 years experiencing and witnessing unspeakable torture, slavery, starvation, and horror. Now, none of us thought that my dad was going to make it to Ethan's bar mitzvah. He was still in quite a bit of pain. But I guess for my dad, suffering is really a relative term. So there he was at the service. I was watching him with tears in my eyes as he was focused on my son reading from the Torah. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but I'd like to believe that he was remembering his own bar mitzvah, about a year before all the troubles began, being together with his mother and father, his grandparents, and his brother. I hope it was a good feeling. I try to imagine my dad, that boy of 17, an orphan, alone, not knowing what the future held for him, not knowing if he even had a future, being in a place where he'd be hungry, he'd be worked, he'd be beaten. Could that 17-year-old boy imagine for 1 minute that he would end up marrying, raising 2 children, providing for his family with a home and abundant food? Could he even imagine for 1 second that he would be, at the age of 81 years old, witnessing the bar mitzvah of his grandson? I felt very proud and very blessed to have played a role in being able to give that gift to him. And I also think, even though the last few years, caring for my dad could sometimes be a burden, I felt so lucky and so blessed that he was in my life. So he can collect all the orange juice, potato kugel his freezer can hold. He's earned it. Thank you.